When moving to a new area, lots of people tend to get bored when they're trying to figure out what exactly should I be doing, what are some fun activities or seasonal activities to be doing in their new home, in their new environment. So today, that's exactly what we're going to cover, the seasonal activities here in Maine. Let's get into it. By the way, my name's Margaret. My dad, Michael, and I make videos to educate you about living in the southern Maine area. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. All of our information is down below. Give us a call, shoot us a text, send us an email. We also have some free downloadable resources below for you to check out as well. So let's talk about the spring. The first thing I wanted to cover is the botanical gardens. Now, these are up in Booth Bay. The flowers and the different areas of the garden or different things you're going to see in the garden do change throughout the year. So this is kind of something you can check out in the spring as well as, in the summer or really any other season. It's going to look a little bit different. They also have a little Christmas festival or a light festival later in the year, which I'll get into in a bit. But yeah, it's a super cool area to check out. Even just doing a quick Google search of the botanical gardens in Maine, you can see that it's a super cool area to check out. Lots of people, even as residents of Maine, this is not necessarily a touristy thing, have checked this out. It's pretty cool. The second thing I wanted to mention that happens in Maine is our maple syrup weekend, our maple syrup Sunday, whatever you want to call it. It's obviously not really like a holiday, but a lot of people kind of treat it as one. Basically on the fourth weekend, specifically that fourth Sunday in March, most of the maple syrup farms in the area will open up and do like tastings and tours and kind of give you the rundown of how everything is manufactured. They make lots of things from maple candy to maple cotton candy to maple ice cream, really everything maple that you could possibly dream of. And it's really interesting. Not even a lot of people in neighboring states know about it. I know when I was in college, my roommates thought that there was like this maple, they had never heard of Maple Syrup Sunday. They thought that it was like this maple holiday that I was talking about when I tried to explain it to them that only occurred in Maine. I think it might be unique to the state. Vermont might also do something similar to this, but it is in March and it's definitely fun to check out, drive around to the different maple syrup farms. While this is unfortunately only a weekend activity, it's definitely one that you should mark on your calendar. The third thing I wanted to mention for springtime activities is winter sports. Now, obviously this can be done towards the later end of fall and in the winter time as well, but the spring is a really fun time to get into winter sports as it's a little bit warmer and you don't necessarily have to bundle up as much. So whether it's downhill skiing, snowboarding, it might start being a little too warm for snowshoeing, but you get the point. You might be able to get away with a little bit of ice skating in the early springtime as the snow isn't completely melted yet. And the spring is obviously a great time to do all of this as you get to go skiing or snowboarding or whatever in just a sweatshirt, sometimes a t-shirt if you're feeling a little crazy versus, a long sleeve, a sweatshirt, a jacket, a scarf, mittens, everything, the whole 9 yards. And the last thing I wanted to mention about the spring is different nature walks, different hiking trails, and specifically to our area, Marginal Way in Ogunquit. Marginal Way is a beautiful, scenic, coastal walk, if you will. It's basically this little paved path along the coast of the ocean in Ogunquit that leads from really downtown Ogunquit all the way into Perkins Cove. It's beautiful. I think it's a little over a mile long, maybe a mile and a half. What I like about this in the springtime is that it's not quite as cold as it is in the winter, but the tourists haven't come starting at the end of May. If you kind of hit it before then you get to see this beautiful area when there's not a whole lot of people around, and it feels really special to be able to experience something like that before it starts getting all of that crazy summer traffic, and you really just get to take it all in without lots of people running around. The next thing I wanted to mention is the summer. Now, these first two things are going to be the beach and boat tours. I know this is specific to coastal Maine, but it's definitely something that should be mentioned as, you can do some sort of tours in inland Maine on the lakes, and it's definitely worth mentioning as Maine does have a pretty big coastline. So Maine, specifically in southern Maine, has nice sandy beaches. They're not quite as rocky as really central Maine up to the more northern coastal area of the state. They have a lot more rocks versus sandy beaches. So down here in the York County area of southern Maine, we do have beautiful sandy beaches, and it does bring a lot of tourists, but in addition to that, it is great for the locals. It's awesome to be able to live so close to the ocean. As we preach in so many of our videos, it really is a great perk to living here, and in certain towns, you get a certain amount of parking passes per per household, or you get a discount on parking passes versus having to pay full price if you live out of state. And aside from just going to the beach, the second thing I wanted to mention is boat tours. Now, not everywhere does this, but it is fun to go out, whether it's whale watching, whether it's going out just for a scenic tour of the coast. Those can be super fun as well. Only takes up a couple hours out of your day. Whether you're vacationing or you're moving to the area, it's a super fun activity to go check out. The third thing I wanted to mention about the summer is strawberry picking and blueberry picking. Really any fruit picking in general. Those are just the two big ones in the area. Strawberry picking happens kind of like mid to end of June, at the very latest at the beginning of July. It only happens for, they say, like, you know, maybe 2 weeks a year, but really it ends up being about a week before everything gets picked off. If you go to, say, Levine's in Sanford like we do, there will be easily 100 cars on opening day at the farm at 5:30 in the morning. It gets super, super busy. This is a really popular activity for a lot of people in the area. And then in addition to that, blueberries a little bit later in the summer, again, a really big activity for people in the area. Doesn't really seem like anything too exciting, but trust me, it's a lot of fun and a lot of the people get really into it. And the next thing I wanted to talk about for the summer is farmers markets. Now, not every town has a farmers market. Some towns do like a tri-town farmers market where they get a couple of different areas together. There are a couple of bigger ones in the area, like the Kittery Farmers Market, for example. I think Portland has a really big farmers market. A lot of different towns do. Some towns they're a little bit smaller, like Sanford or Kennebunk, but just in general, these are really fun. They typically happen every Sunday from, you know, the beginning of June all the way through September. Some of them go a little bit earlier or a little bit later, but every Sunday or sometimes Saturday. It's something to do on the weekends. It's not a lot, but it gets you out of the house, and these tend to be a really big hit in the summer. And the last thing I wanted to mention for the summer is visiting state parks, visiting national parks like Acadia, visiting the different nature reserves, and just kind of exploring and having a fun time with that. Bar Harbor, obviously, with Acadia National Park, is a fantastic place to go visit. There are, you know, a couple of different state parks in Maine as well, but definitely whether you're just visiting the area or if you're moving to the area, this is an absolute must to check out. Even if you're not into hiking or anything like that, just going up to Bar Harbor and, you know, taking a look in the state park, just enjoying all that there is there and all that there is to see and explore. It really is pretty amazing to look at, and I would highly recommend that to be an activity that you check out if you're moving here. So next, let's talk about the fall. This is my favorite season, so I'm definitely excited to talk about this one. But the fall, the first thing I wanted to mention is hiking. This kind of plays off of that last note for summer, you know, visiting the different national parks, visiting the state parks in Maine, or just really any different nature reserves, hiking even just small mountains like Mount Agamenticus over in the town of York in York County. It's just a small little hike, might take you an hour. And while this isn't necessarily everyone's jam, you can actually drive up Mount Agamenticus and a lot of other different mountains or small hills or different nature reserves. You don't necessarily have to hike it or walk it. A lot of them have tours as well. But again, just getting outside, especially as the weather starts to cool down a bit, I like to just recommend people get outside and really explore everything that the state has to offer in order to really enjoy being here. The next thing I wanted to mention is apple picking. Now, even more so than strawberry picking or blueberry picking, apple picking is probably one of the more popular things to be doing in Maine in the fall, as I'm sure it is a lot of places. But there's plenty of different farms and different apple orchards to go to in the area. For me personally, I like going to places that have pumpkins, apples, corn mazes, little, you know, petting zoos or little farms in the area as well. Just kind of an all-in-one, make a whole day out of it or an afternoon out of it. But apple picking is definitely a popular activity. A lot of different places will have apple cider or apple cider donuts. They kind of do that later in the winter too when people are cutting down their trees or their Christmas trees. But again, another really fun activity to do. And kind of going off of that, another one that I wanted to mention for the fall is pumpkin picking. Now, obviously you can't really do this until a little bit later in the fall or closer to Halloween. Some people like to get theirs earlier in October if they're really excited, but you know, typically we recommend doing it a week before Halloween. That way your pumpkin doesn't start to rot before the holiday actually comes. And yeah, pumpkin picking, just like a lot of other areas in the country, very popular activity to do in the fall. And the last activity I wanted to mention for the fall is fairs. Now, there's tons and tons of different fairs throughout Maine. They start typically in September and last through sometimes, the beginning of November, but generally speaking, just in the fall, we have a lot of them. Now, in our area, the Common Ground Fair, that one's a bit of a hike, but it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours north of here. We have the Freiburg Fair. Now, obviously, there's more than that, but fairs are a really popular thing to go to. Now, I know this is kind of a countrywide thing. It's not specific to Maine, but it's definitely a fun thing to do, and especially because our seasons change and because the spring, summer, fall, and winter all look so different, it can be a lot of fun visiting something like that, especially when you live in New England and in Maine. And lastly, what can you do in the winter? Because this is what people tend to struggle with the most. A lot of people who live in the northern areas, they tend to want to stay inside. A lot of people can, get a little bit bored in the winter. They're like, oh my God, what is there to do? Especially if you live in a touristier area, like, the southern Maine coast, when a lot of places or a good chunk of places shut down in the winter. What can you do? So the first thing I wanted to recommend, again, is winter sports. So again, skiing, snowboarding, snowmobiling, ice skating, hockey, pond puck, whatever you want to do, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, really just finding something or finding a way to get outside, something fun to do in the winter. I find that people who enjoy winter sports or get out a little bit more in the winter, they tend to enjoy living here a little bit more than the people who really only enjoy it in the summer when it's hot. For a lot of people, summer is their favorite season because it is, it's so short here in Maine that we really appreciate when it is warm outside. But because we have a fairly long winter, again, I think it's really important to find something like that and get outside and do those winter activities so you learn to enjoy all of those cold months as well. And ice fishing, that's also a popular one. The next thing I wanted to recommend for the winter is visiting the touristy coastal towns. Now, this kind of is what I recommend for people who are thinking about moving to the area, and or if you've already moved here, it's just kind of a fun activity to do. But visiting those areas that typically have a lot of people in them to just kind of get to experience the magic of those small little cute coastal towns without tons of people around, without lots of traffic on the road. It can be a lot of fun just going to the different restaurants when things aren't super busy, when there won't be as long of a wait for your food, or you won't have to wait to even get a table. Now, there's a bit of a misconception that everything in Maine shuts down in the winter. That's definitely not true. There are plenty of places still open, and even more so now than there was even 10 years ago. It is true that a lot of places do shut down in the winter. For example, small boutique little stores, a lot of times those close down for a few months in the winter as there's just not enough people in the area to really justify them even being open. But there's still plenty of places that are open even in the smaller coastal towns, and it's a lot of fun to check them out. And if you're moving to the area or thinking about it, I like to tell people to visit Maine twice. Visit once in July or August and visit once in January or February. It's drastically different depending on where you're looking, not necessarily everywhere in the state, but along the coast in those, more busy coastal towns, it's definitely important to check them out during different times of the year. The next thing I wanted to mention, again, is the botanical gardens. Like I said earlier, they look very different during different times of the year. They do decorate for the winter, and obviously it's going to look drastically different in the winter than it does in the spring or in the summer. Just kind of something that you can check out during different seasons, and it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a different experience, and it's a lot of fun to check out. And the last thing I wanted to mention is cutting down your Christmas trees, tree lighting ceremonies, and like Christmas festivals. Again, this is something that you can do in different parts of the country, but because Maine has, our seasons change, we have all 4 seasons, they look drastically different during each time of the year. Cutting down your tree, not everybody's into this. Not everybody wants to do this. It can be a little bit of work. Some people just go to the grocery store or go to Walmart and buy their tree that way, but a lot of people do like cutting down their own trees, buying their wreaths or getting to pick them out. A lot of times they offer different, donuts or apple cider, or they'll provide, a little bit of food for you to buy when you're cutting down your trees or bringing your family. You can kind of make a morning or an afternoon out of it, and it really is a lot of fun. And then going off of that, different tree lighting ceremonies like the Kennebunkport Prelude, or different Christmas festivals like they have up at LL Bean in Freeport, Maine. They're just a lot of fun, and a lot of times these little festivals will last for, a good week or two, depending on where you are, where you're looking, but they're just a lot of fun. Now, obviously, not everyone celebrates Christmas, and some of these are geared towards that holiday, but there are plenty of other different festivals in Maine. They're just kind of celebrating the holidays coming, regardless of, any sort of religion that you are, and they're a lot of fun to kind of check out the different areas or the different places that are hosting these kinds of events to kind of get into the spirit of the holidays. So that's our list of things you can do in Maine during all the different seasons, seasonal activities or not. Fun things to do in the area so that if you're moving here or just relocating from one part of the state to the other, you have plenty of things to do. Again, moving to a new area, it can obviously be hard to find things to do, to get out and meet different people. That can be really difficult, but definitely get out there, try some new things, do some things you've never done before. It can make moving or relocating really anywhere in the state a lot more enjoyable. And if you're moving somewhere, whether it's Maine or somewhere like Maine, where the seasons do change a few times a year, finding different seasonal activities is super important. So that's all we have for you guys today. And again, my name's Margaret. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. All of our information is down below, and we have those free downloadable resources for you guys to use as well. We have a relocation guide, a seller success guide, a home buying checklist. Everything's down below, and we'll see you next time.